Morning, everyone. The news never stops coming. So we've got to talk about something else today. And then something was released. We were expecting the release. I have in my hot little hands, or more specifically, my second monitor screen, the latest Privileges Committee report, which is not about Boris Johnson this time, but is about the Boris Johnson cultists who attacked the work of the committee and thereby potentially committed a contempt of Parliament. Now, I am just going to point out, worth noting, so John has given Nadine an 11-day suspension. The Privileges Committee can't do that. The Privileges Committee cannot instigate its own investigations. It acts, and this is why attacking the committee is an attack on Parliament, because the Privileges Committee only acts when Parliament tells it to. So in order for the Privileges Committee to investigate any of the people named, which I'm going to go over, they would have to be told to do so by a House of Commons vote, basically. Someone have to put forward a motion. Now, it might well be that Labour decides to put forward a motion. The Speaker, of course, would have to decide whether it's a motion that can go to a vote, but I see no reason why not. But it depends what Labour come up with, if they want to do it. I see no reason why Labour shouldn't do it, because it'll be, if any, it will put Rishi Sunak on the spot about his integrity claims. You know what I mean? So, but I'll just read this. So in the Privileges Committee reports, it says Erskine May. So Erskine May, for those who don't know, is like it's like the Bible for Parliament. It's the set of codes and regulations and so on and standards of behaviour. Erskine May defines a contempt of Parliament as follows: any act or omission which obstructs or impedes either House of Parliament in the performance of its functions, or which obstructs or impedes any member or officer of such House in the discharge of their duty, or which has a tendency, directly or indirectly, to produce such results, may be treated as a contempt, even though there is no precedent of the offence. It is therefore impossible to list every act which might be considered to amount to a contempt, as parliamentary privilege is a living concept. So just to go down, obviously the reports that have just come out, I've not read every word yet. It's not a particularly long one, but I haven't read every word. But just to go down, so, and there's a link in the description below if you want to read it yourself. So at the end, before I go through their evidence, the bold bits at the end are: we consider that the House should maintain its protection of inquiries into individual conduct referred to the Committee of Privileges in the same way it does those being considered by the House's own Committee on Standards and Independent Expert Panel. So what they're saying is, if people attack our work, if they attempt to subvert our work, you should deal with them. So they're telling Parliament, you need to deal with this. But the Privileges Committee itself cannot deal with it. Parliament has to decide to instruct them. I will also just point out, it's worth mentioning, if Parliament were to order an investigation into these individuals, it probably wouldn't be the Privileges Committee as such, because those individuals are like the victims. So you can't have the victims also be the prosecutors. I mean, obviously, those people would then cry foul. Even I would say, yeah, that's not right. So you'd need different people to do it. But their recommendations at the end, it says, we recommend that the House agree a resolution in the following terms: that this House notes with approval the special report from the Committee of Privileges, considers that where the House has agreed to refer a matter relating to individual conduct of the Committee of Privileges, members of this House should not impugn the integrity of that committee or its members, or attempt to lobby or intimidate those members, or to encourage others to do so, since such behaviour undermines the proceedings of the House and is itself capable of being a contempt. And it considers it expedient that the House of Lords is made aware of the special report in this resolution, so that the House can take such action as it deems appropriate. In other words, actually, none of that would suggest to me they're trying to say, if any of them are bound for the House of Lords, maybe they shouldn't be. But actually, I don't think any of them are. Nadine Dorries isn't getting into the House of Lords, is she? Then it says, if the government fails to table such a motion within reasonable time, we note that any member has the power to write to the Speaker to ask for the matters in the special report to be given precedence as a matter of privilege. If Mr. Speaker does grant precedence, that member will be able to table a motion An appropriate motion to enable the House to reach a decision on these matters. Such motion will be debatable and amendable. So what they're saying is, to translate, they're saying the government should present this motion to the House for a vote. But if the government don't do it within a reasonable time frame, so we're now talking after summer, because there's only a few weeks left of Parliament before the summer recess. So what they're basically saying is, after summer, if the government hasn't done this, then any member of the House, which of course could be the leader of the opposition, he would have the most clout, Keir Starmer, can present the motion instead. And then it'll say it will be for the House to consider what further action, if any, to take in respect to members of the House referred to in the special report. So what the Privileges Committee are doing it here, they're saying to Parliament, we think you should recognise the members of the House of Commons have attempted to divert our work, essentially. Copperberg saying, watch out, Mad Nads might resign again. Yes. I'm not sure she's going to resign at all at this point, you know. But there we go. Is it just me or has Starmer ignored more than one open goal lately? I don't think so. I think there are some times when I think to myself, you know, why doesn't he mention this or why doesn't he bring this up? But it's really difficult to say that someone as leader of the opposition is not doing well enough when you look at the polling position, particularly the very recent polling position. Like, it's spectacular to me how many people are saying, oh, Starmer's made this mistake recently and this mistake recently. And you think, have you seen the polls? So there are things, you know, that I would say empirically you could say, well, you know, wouldn't it be better to do this or wouldn't it be better to do this? But you just look at the polls and you go, well, whatever they're doing is working. So it's really hard because I am very evidence based. If I'm going to suggest that a thing, you know, is a good idea or a bad idea, I expect to use evidence to back my assertion up. And the main evidence for is the opposition doing a good job is, well, what are they going to win the next election? At the moment, the evidence is, yeah, they are. But I'll read some more comments. I'm going to go through the annex, which is the good bit. But has Jacob Rees-Mogg got any lead in his pencil? I don't know. He ever has. He just stands there talking rubbish, doesn't he? He's got less energy than my old Dynamo light that I used to have for my bicycle, which is a ridiculous notion. When I was young, I had a Dynamo bike light. It's pointless because every time you stopped at a junction, it went off. So when you're at your most vulnerable, you're most likely to be hit by a car. It went off. Ridiculous. Mark saying, late to the party today. Hope I didn't miss much. So I was just explaining, Mark, how the Privileges Committee have written their special report into members of the House, Boris Johnson fans, who impugned their work. So I'm going to go over now their evidence for this. A lot of it is Nadine Dorries. Prepare yourself. So 15th of June, 2023, Right Honourable. Oh, yeah, she's a Right Honourable. Sorry. And she's going to be a Right Honourable for the rest of her life. She's not going to be a lady, though. Right Honourable Nadine Dorries MP on Twitter. We also need to keep a close eye on the careers of the Conservative MPs who sat on that committee. Do they suddenly find themselves on chicken runs into safe seats? Gongs. Were promises made? We need to know if they were. Justice has to be seen to be done at all levels of this process. So what she's doing there is she's suggesting that their seats should that they should be deselected by their members. So they're trying to encourage Conservative Party members in their constituency to deselect them. And she's also suggesting that they have been corrupted, that they've been promised honours. Or she said, because she's saying, were promises made? You know, gongs means honours. She's saying, were promises made? So she's suggesting that the committee are corrupt, that the Conservative members of the committee at least are corrupt. Uncle Evan saying, Phil, fair comments. I guess that Starmer's sport for choice now is to attack the government. He absolutely is. There are times when I still say he could have said this and I thought that would be good. There are still things. I'm not saying like he won't ever miss things, but at the end of the day, the polling is as it is. And also, let's face facts, this mess that the Tories are in over the Privileges Committee, I mean, it didn't end with Boris Johnson. It's still going on now. This is a massive mess for the Tory party. And again, who started it all? Who trapped Boris Johnson into his lies in Parliament? You know, who drew them out and then presented a motion that Tory MPs couldn't vote against. Because the reason this is unprecedented, I'm not saying Boris Johnson's the only prime minister who's ever lied to Parliament. My goodness me. No, of course not. Of course he's not. But he's the only one who's ever been investigated for it. And why was that? Because he thought he was clever enough to go up against the top prosecutor. So he's not the only prime minister to have lied to Parliament. He's just the only one to have done it in a very, very stupid way. Richard says, love Nads, no filter between brain and mouth, constantly blurts out loudly the silent bit. She does indeed. Shall I just do all the Nadine Dorries ones first? Because she's got a few of them, then I'll go back to some of the others. So the next Nadine Dorries one was 23rd of March of this year on Talk TV. Is Talk TV, does she? I thought it was GB News she was. Oh, Lawrence Melia there. Thank you very much. Super chat, $4.99. Isn't it interesting that Boris, Trump and Putin have had politically devastating events happen to them? Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, what I would say, if we look at this, Trump might come back. I know it looks like you'd think, really? He might. You can't rule it out. Putin, I mean, there's a great deal of damage potentially coming. I mean, there's now talk about, because people just assumed that if Putin fell, he'd be replaced by someone else. He'd be replaced by someone else just as bad. Let's not make any bones about that. The whole system's knackered in Russia, just like it is now in this country. But we're not as bad as Russia. I mean, there's that, I suppose. But there are now fears for the actual collapse of the Russian state. And that's not a good thing, because then where do the nuclear weapons end up in? But as for Boris Johnson, the public have turned on him. The problem is the Conservative Party have not. And as the Conservative Party are always going to be a force in this country, until they have turned on him, like the Conservative Party proper, until they recognise, then, you know, we're not out of the woods in terms of what he brought. But there we are. Berlusconi certainly can't hurt us anymore. Anyway, the next Nadine Dorries, Talk TV. I don't think there was ever a world in which this committee was going to find Boris innocent. The committee have demonstrated very clearly that they've decided early on to find him guilty, so accuse him of corruption again. The committee knew that they had not a shred of evidence to prove that he misled with intent. They changed the rules, which they did not, lowered the bar and inserted the vague term reckless into the terms of reference, which is an irrelevant statement to make because he's not been found. In fact, it was Boris Johnson who tried to make that suggestion. Boris Johnson is the one who said he would accept a charge of reckless misleading the House. No, that was his charge. Blah, blah, blah. And so the vague term reckless into the terms of reference, Boris Johnson will be found guilty by this kangaroo court. There is no doubt about that. And that in itself would be a disgraceful and possibly unlawful conclusion with serious reputational consequences. So she's really laying it on thick. Absolutely laying it on thick here. In fact, saying that Owen Jones probably wanted Rebecca Long Bailey and another 5 years of opposition. There wouldn't have been 5 years of opposition with Rebecca Long Bailey. The Conservatives would have gone to the polls in 2022. And so it would have been at least 8 years. At least 8 years. They'd have gone to they wanted to go to the polls in 2022. Conservative Party headquarters were working towards that because they knew that Brexit was just going to make things worse and worse. This was well known amongst journalists who talk to people, Tory strategists. It was well known that they wanted last summer for the general election, but they couldn't get it because by then the polls had turned against them. And indeed, we know they were right. The Tory strategists were right. Every year has brought more and more chickens home to roost. It's just getting worse and worse for the Tories the longer they leave it. So what they hoped to do was go to the polls last year, maybe get a reduced majority, but still a majority, and then carry on for another 5 years at least. You say Michael Fabricant's doubling down on his contempt of Parliament. Is he named? He is named here. I'll go through the other NADS ones, though. Next one would be 3rd of March, 2023. On Twitter, they have nothing. He protested his innocence all along, and he was right. It was a gross miscarriage of justice at the very least. So again, accusing them of corruption or incompetence. Final one, 1st of September 2022, in the Daily Mail, this expert legal opinion shows that the inquiry was biased, Kafkaesque witch hunt. It should now be halted before it does any more damage. So Mad Nads, you would look at that and go, I know we're not fans of her, but you look at that and you go, how can that not be a contempt of Parliament? But then we go through some of the others. Zach Gold. Oh, this is why they'll have mentioned the House of Lords. I've just realised Zach Goldsmith's in the House of Lords. So they're suggesting that maybe the House of Lords takes action against him. So Zach Goldsmith on Twitter. Oh, Zach Goldsmith, by the way, for those who don't know, he is famous as being incredibly wealthy. He's paid for more than a few of Boris Johnson's holidays. And he was put into the House of Lords by Boris Johnson after being an electoral liability as an MP because he kept losing safe Tory seats. He's an idiot. So he said on Twitter, in retweeting a tweet calling the inquiry a witch hunt and kangaroo court, stated exactly this. There was only ever going to be one outcome and the evidence was totally irrelevant to it. So accused him of corruption. Mark Jenkinson, lovely chap. When the witch hunt has been forgotten, future generations will look back in astonishment. Michael Fabricant, you mentioned Michael Fabricant. Serious questions will need to be asked about the manner in which the investigation was conducted. These were no jurists, as was apparent by... First of all, he doesn't know what a jurist is. He means juror, not jurist. He's an idiot. He's a legislator. Doesn't even know what pissing words mean. These were no jurists, as was apparent by the tone of the examination. The question of caliber, malice, and prejudice will need to be answered now or by historians. That's probably what got him his knighthood, saying that. Brendan Clark-Smith, he's been doing the rounds this week, hasn't he? Brendan Clark-Smith, the supply teacher. Apparently the shit. Actually, someone did say he was a shit supply teacher. To be fair, or I did supply teachers. We're all shit. It's a crap job. But anyway, in fact, that's what he deserves. I know Graham was saying yesterday, he shouldn't go back to that. Actually, he should go back to doing supply teaching because it's crap. It's a miserable existence. Unless that was just my experience. But he should have my supply teaching experience, put it that way. Anyway, Brendan Clark-Smith on Twitter, 9th of June, 2023. Tonight, we saw the end result of a parliamentary witch hunt, which would put a banana republic to shame. It is the people of this country who elect and decide on their MPs. It's called democracy, and we used to value it here. Sadly, this no longer appears to be the case. Do you know what I would say? If I was Keir Starmer as well, and I absolutely say he must do this, Rishi Sunak said he would discipline people who impugned the committee, and he has not done so. If I were Keir Starmer, I would absolutely push that. I would push his weakness, because we know Labour pushing 2 lines on Rishi Sunak, which is working. 1, he's out of touch. 2, he's weak. This is a weakness one, right? Keir Starmer can say, I had an MP impugn the work of a committee which reported into the Labour Party, and I withdrew the whip. Why hasn't Rishi Sunak taken the same action? This is someone impugning Parliament itself. These are people impugning Parliament itself. Is there any more? There's more. Jacob Rees-Mogg's on the list. Jacob Rees-Mogg, 22nd of March, 2023, BBC Radio 4, asked whether he shared the view expressed by some of Mr. Johnson's supporters that the process was a kangaroo court, said, I think it makes kangaroo court look respectable. Andrea Jenkins on Twitter from March this year, I hope to see him fully exonerated and to put an end to this kangaroo court. Jacob Rees-Mogg again, GB News. The Privileges Committee is not even a proper legal setup. It has a gossamer of constitutional propriety thrown over it, but is in fact a political committee against Boris Johnson. No, it doesn't have a gossamer of constitutional propriety. It was set up by MPs, all of them, including Jacob Rees-Mogg. Not a single MP opposed it. Semper saying, what's been amazing as an American is hearing their talking points shoot back and forth across the pond. Kangaroo court being said there within hours of Republicans saying it here gave me whiplash. They're the same people. They're advised by the same people. Advised by the same. Like the Big Honor said, ex-supply teacher here. Agreed, yeah. When is Spygate being investigated? Not while there's a Conservative Party in government. I do hope Labour at least give the National Crime Agency the nod, though. Labour, when they come to power, the first thing that David Lammy and Yvette Cooper need to do, very first thing, with MI6 and MI5 respectively, is say, You have been, or we have been told as MPs that you have been ordered not to look for signs of Russian interference in our political system. I am here to tell you, as the Secretary of State in charge of you, that you are to look for evidence of any harms intended to the UK. You will not look for evidence. You will look for evidence wherever it needs to be found. That is what they need to do immediately. And we should also have a proper investigation into Russian interference. Where was I up to? Priti Patel. Priti Patel's on there. How can a handful of members of parliament in a committee, really be, this is on GB News, really be that objective in light of some of the individual comments that have been made? I don't want to name people, but it is a fact, the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability. I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly, involved here. So let's just go through the list of ones. Nadine Dorries, Zach Goldsmith, Mark Jenkinson, Michael Fabricant, Brendan Clark-Smith, Andrea Jenkins, Priti Patel, Jacob Rees-Mogg are the ones named as being very naughty individuals. And of course, it is a proper rogues gallery, isn't it? It is. If you were to name the Boris Johnson fan club, that would be it. That is there. Murdoch media all suggested Lammy will be out with a reshuffle. Yeah, so far, if you look at the right-wing media, David Lammy's out, Ed Miliband's out, Lisa Nandy's out. It'll not be long before they're saying that Keir Starmer's going to sack himself. I would just say, I have my views on reshuffles. All of those individuals, by the way, are superb in their roles and they should stay where they are. I would say there are some changes I would suggest. I'm not going to say what they are. But it's not any of the individuals being named. In fact, the reason the right wing are naming those individuals is because they want them gone. They want David Lammy gone. They want Lisa Nandy gone. They want Ed Miliband gone. But anyway, don't understand why Starmer did not already raise this in PMQs. Right, I might be missing something here. He can't have raised this in PMQs because it's only just been published. He may raise it next week, but at the end of the day, Labour at the moment have an embarrassment of riches with which to attack the Conservatives with. Housing they chose this week because it is really, I don't know how much people appreciate it, but it really is a wedge issue for voters. Housing is for key voters, not for the population at large, but for a lot of swing voters, housing is a serious issue, particularly when there's the mortgage crisis going on. It's a huge issue. So they will pick the issue that allows them to put the Conservatives under the most pressure, but also to present their own ideas. Labour also it's not enough for them to just attack the Conservatives. They need to actually promote their own policies. And they're not really doing that terribly well, I have to say. The Tory party made bets on who will be named instead of being punished. They're in fact revered by their peers. Well, see what this will do now, this thing. There's no way that I don't believe any punishments will follow, by the way. I don't believe Parliament will vote to initiate an investigation into these. How many individuals is it? Let me just count. Nadine Dorries. So Zach Goldsmith will be House of Lords, so I'll miss him out. Nadine Dorries, Mark Jenkinson, Michael Fabricant, Brendan Clark-Smith, Andrea Jenkins, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel. 7 individuals, right? Not the 7 who voted against the report, though, interestingly. Were any of them? Can't remember. But it's Labour can absolutely run with this. It won't. Don't expect it immediately. I think they might ask questions in Parliament. It might not even be PMQs. They might be an urgent question. It might be that they table an urgent question to discuss it in Parliament. But the payoff from this will come after summer. So this could be an autumn feast for us. Labour will, because there's no way Rishi Sunak's going to put this motion towards MPs. No way in hell. So Keir Starmer will want to do it. Or he might get a backbencher to it. Maybe Dawn Butler would like to do it. But in reality, I suspect Keir Starmer doing it has the most chance of the Speaker accepting it. But there we go. Last few comments here. Hang on, I need to pick on comments that haven't just followed a thread. It's not the police's job to investigate and gather evidence. Well, that's more what they said about Partygate. Yeah, that's the Met Police's actual line when they were refusing to investigate Partygate to begin with was, "It's not our job to gather evidence." It's like, well, whose is it then? You're basically detectives. You're supposed to be the best detectives in the country. Weren't they included Crudas as well? Not sure what the repercussions for a lord would be, man. The Oh yeah, that's a point. Oh yeah, he's not mentioned. You're right. Crudas isn't actually mentioned here. That's interesting. Um, that is a good point. He's not there. Oh, I tell you what they have done though. I've only just seen this Conservative Post email campaign. An example of selective pressure brought to bear on Conservative members of the committee was the email campaign instigated by the Conservative Post website, urging those members to stand aside from the committee, um, and alleging that the inquiry was deeply flawed, biased, and unfair. Two members of the House of Lords, whose peerages were confirmed on the recommendation of Mr. Johnson, were among over 600 people who emailed committee members. So that will include David Crudas. He will be one of them. But he's not named, is he? Oh, yeah, it is. No, he is named. Sorry. Whose president is Lord Crudas and whose vice president is Lord Greenhull. So he is sort of named. Um, There. So that's interesting. Okay, I'd missed that. So yeah, he's named as well. How can you go around with a surname like that when you're incredibly rich? You doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can go around calling yourself whatever you like. Um, Maybe someone needs to email the people who wrote this report to amend it. I'm not sure what that's in relation to. Sadly, no. Right, last one. Christopher saying, sadly, I struggle to have confidence in Starmer's political instincts on policy. I've yet to see him push a policy that doesn't already have wide backing. How do you think you get elected? How do you think you get elected? If you're trying to suggest, as the last point, if you try and suggest, why can't Labour persuade the public to adopt a thing that they don't already do? Consider how he does that. Labour have no voice, really. What voice have they got? Now, I know I criticise them quite a lot for not having presented their own voice, for not taking social media seriously. Because if I can have the voice I have, which is not a very big voice, on YouTube, but on my own, then why on earth can't the Labour Party get a much bigger voice? But they don't. So if Keir Starmer was to say to vote, you're trying to suggest Keir Starmer says to voters, no, you're wrong about this. Let me explain to you. All of the or virtually all of the media would say that Keir Starmer's talking rubbish and that he's accusing voters of being stupid. How does that work? That doesn't get you elected. Doesn't get you elected. We've tried it. We tried it quite recently. Doesn't get you elected. But there we go. Do I realize I'm stopping you decorating the house? Right. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. You get on to decorating the house, Uncle Heavy. We will call it there. Thank you very much for coming on. You can all read the report yourself. It's not that long. It's about 14 pages. I shall be reading it with a great deal. It's actually two of those pages are just like references. So I shall be reading it with some interest. Don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and the link below will have not only this report, but the details for Patreon if you wish to join the channel on Patreon. And have a very good day. And until next time, I'll see you later.